All right. Welcome, everybody, to Dwell Church of the Peninsula. My name is Matt Stefan. I'm part of the leadership team here. It was lovely singing with you all. We have basically a beautiful choir. Did you hear those harmonies? Normally, I compliment Lisa's singing, but you guys were the main event that time. We'll get to do it again, the doxology at the end. It'll be fun. Welcome to Dwell Church. We are a 2 1/4-year-old church plant. We got 5 core values. We want to be Jesus-centered, research-based, trauma-informed, diverse, affirming, and inclusive. And we're on a quest where we want to build a church where anyone could take a step closer to Jesus. So if you're visiting us for the first time, would love for you to feel the invitation from Jesus to take a step closer to him, even if just for these 40 minutes this one time. Glad you're here. If you are here, would love for you to connect with us. I'd love to hear your story. We'd love to see how Dwell Church could serve you or connect with you. There's also lots of good resources here about our research-based value, the neuroscience of spirituality, surprisingly strongly in favor of Christian-style spirituality. A lot of good resources if you're willing to connect with us. One of them is a fun weekly email from me. Keep you invested in what's going on with Dwell Church. You could tap your phone to connect if you'd like to do that. A couple other things I want to mention. Tonight, right after this, we're going to field work. It's great. It's one of my favorite things. Not only is it great, it's also beautiful out. We discerned this year that Dwell Church is in a season of building deeper connectivity, connective tissue amongst each other. So I'm excited for you guys to chat with each other a little bit. Now, we've engineered this so that if you don't like talking to people, we'll have some prompts and aids and conversation topics so that it won't be awkward. And I want to personally vouch for every person that goes to Dwell Church. Dwell Church people are amazing. You'll have fun getting to know them. See you at Fieldwork, 6:30 p.m. There is pizza. We'll be serving pizza. We are also started this week phone interviews for our new staff position that we are hiring that you all worked very hard to finance. Very exciting stuff. We're hiring a full-time director for our kids and students ministry, so be praying for that person and that process. Yes, if you know anything about Dwell Church, you know we have like a dozen amazing middle schoolers that just run around, and we're going to turn them into a youth group, and it's going to be awesome. So we're looking for that person to do that. And the next, I want to invite up our intern, my good friend, Ozzy Gates, to tell you about some stuff. Give it up for Ozzy. Woo!
Okay. I actually took notes because I forgot earlier some of the things. Okay, so we're having a queer group dinner at Michelle and Anon's house. Shout out to y'all. And so a couple things. One, it's on May 31st, so the Saturday before story night, so the end of the month. The goal is to sort of, I guess, discern together what we want a regular queer group to look like. We also will be discerning what we will be eating for dinner because there's currently no plan. It's 18 plus, but if you're like close to 18, if you have a kid that's 17 or something like that, you can come talk to me. We can discuss it. But I want to also mention that like we truly mean all ages. We have someone who's coming who's going to be 50. I'm 27. Like if you know someone who's in their 70s and wants to come, we want to make it really clear that we're not going to take photos. Like, if you don't want to be outed, we'll be very, like, discerning or, discreet about that. And if you're someone who's questioning, whether you're married, whatever, like, if that is something you want to explore and want to understand more of yourself, whether it's your gender, sexuality, queerness in general, if that's something you feel drawn to this, please come. You are welcome. And we're happy to kind of build this group together. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. If you have any questions at all about this, come talk to me. This is the address. Take a photo of it, or I can send you a link of it too. Thank you guys.
Great job. Excited about that. Thank you for leading it. All right. As Lisa said, we are in a new teaching series today called Taste and See, Loving God with All 5 Senses. And this comes from, as almost all of our Sundays do, our community discernment process where one Sunday every 6 months, so twice a year, we sit in table groups and we decide together what we want from this hour of our week. And in those table groups, they have a group project where they have to produce, at least among other things, a sense of what they would do with 4 or 5 weeks of Dwell Church Sundays. What question would you want to address? How would you do that? Would you want to completely jettison the sermon and the music and do something completely different? Would we go on a hike? Whatever it is, we want those ideas. We get them on paper. One of the big themes this year was how do we engage our body more deeply in our faith? And as we will explore together, there is just something awkward about talking about your body in public, or our bodies, or me talk about your body. This is going to be a little uncomfortable because we have been trained and conditioned to devalue our bodily experience. We'll talk about exactly why that is, and we'll feel it out together, the awkwardness and the power of engaging our bodies more deeply in our sense of following Jesus. That's what we're working on. 2 stories I want to share with you. First of all, yesterday was my birthday, and my daughter, yes, thank you. My daughter and my wife planned a surprise for me. They blindfolded me, they put me in the car. They drove me 20 minutes away. I was getting a little car sick. And then they got me out and they walked me down the block and they took me in this little store and they opened my eyes and they said, "Surprise, you're getting your nose pierced today." This has been Margot's dream, to get me back on Team Nose Ring. I was on Team Nose Ring till our little puppy pulled that sucker out of there, and I could never get it to work quite right again. So back on Team Nose Ring, engaging my body in some things. So I'll let Margot tell you some more of the details there. The other part that this slide was originally intended to convey to you before I learned I was getting my nose pierced yesterday is my own journey with my mental health. I've told you some about that before, but it was in our premarital counseling that our therapist told me, would you be willing to take an assessment for depression? And I was like, yeah, sure. And then they were like, in the next session, they were like, you scored 100% on this. And I was like, yes, I did it. Then I went on my own journey of finding some healing in my soul and in my mental health. But the first phase of that was me thinking, I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to learn all about my family history. I'm going to learn all about my patterns and about my wife's patterns and how it all works. I'm going to map it all out. Maybe I'll draw a diagram. I'm going to think hard enough until I understand this so that it will not happen to me anymore. And I wish someone had told me, the way I'm going to tell you, that on your own journey, the key is not thinking about it, but feeling it. Where is it in your body? And I will explain that over and over again in this series, that your body has a wisdom that your mind alone cannot access. This is the way that God made you. And together we're going to learn to find those places where our body is speaking to us, to listen carefully, and even to experience Jesus' presence right there with us. So what we're going to talk about in this series is healing our relationship to our own body. And there's moments where I was writing this out and I was like, I'm going to stand up in front of people and I'm going to say, healing your relationship to your body. How's that going to feel? Weird. That's going to feel awkward because we are not regularly doing this type of work in the way that we understand ourselves. So we're going to talk about that. Why do we mistrust our bodies? What does it mean for Jesus to be with us in our bodies as we feel the bodily sensation of being human? And we're going to see along the way that the 5 senses, they're just baby steps. Each week we're going to focus on a different of the 5 senses, but those are just entry points into a more bodily understanding of ourselves and ultimately a more embodied sense of our worship, of how we follow Jesus with our very bodies. But first, I want to talk about the dog and the podcaster, and I'm going to read you some from the dog and some from the podcaster. The dog is this guy. Does anybody know this guy on the internet? It's called No Filter Philosophy. It's basically this guy rants about psychology, philosophy, theology. But because they're so ranty, I think he wanted to take the edge off it. So instead of his own face ranting, he has this cartoon dog do all the ranting. And I love it. I'm going to read you one. Ready? This entry is called Weaponized Self-Awareness. Okay? This is what the No Filter Philosophy dog on the internet told me. And if you tithe to Dwell Church, thank you. This is what you paid for. Is me reading from a dog from the internet. It's great. He ranted, he said, you cannot think your way out of a psychological pattern because your brain will just hand you better reasons why everyone else is the problem. Insight without bodily regulation is just using therapy speak to weaponize your self-awareness. If you really want to disrupt a pattern, you have to regulate your body first and find the insight later. Teach your body to sit with discomfort for 10 seconds. That's your first step. Not to understand it, not to process the root cause, not to have a sense of your generational trauma, to just feel it. Most therapy goes straight for insight with the let's explore your patterns, except you can't explore expletive when your nervous system is screaming. Regulation isn't sexy. Feeling the feelings in your body will have no breakthrough moments, no transformation arc, no moment where you feel smarter than anyone. It's just boring stuff like breathing and putting your feet on the ground and asking you a weird question about where do you feel this in your body. It will not make you feel smarter or more evolved. But if you stick with body before mind, you will make progress. Thank you, dog. What he's trying to tell us is understanding is important, but it won't fix it. Feeling it will. And part of the way that we work through our feelings here at Dwell Church that we're going to talk a lot about in this series is that we are all mostly terrified to feel our feelings, especially the body sensation of them. And the only way that I have known to really, truly do that is to remember that Jesus will be with me when I'm doing that. That Jesus is with me when I decide to admit the things that I don't want to admit and to feel them in ways that I'd rather not feel. Feeling it well. All right, a bit about the podcaster. I listen to the Ezra Klein podcast a lot, and so do you because I read long sections from it in the sermons. So here's one. Okay, what do we need to be able to recover our ability to feel? We need to listen to the Ezra Klein podcast. Here it is. Pema Chodron is a 90-year-old Buddhist nun, and she talks about the power of feeling your feelings in your body. And she's got lots of books about why you and I are programmed to avoid any negative sensations in our bodies, how we arrived there. And so I want to read you some excerpts from this. Pema says, one of the things I've started saying as I coach people through Buddhist practice is that you've got to get your nervous system used to certain things. If you try to just go about changing the outer circumstances, which, of course, I applaud anyone trying to do, you won't get very far. This is more of an approach of working with what the outer circumstances will trigger within you. And what they trigger will be something physical in your body. So if you can connect with that, then you'll start to find you get some traction. And actually, in working with a lot of people, it doesn't seem very hard to connect with that part of you. Because if you say, what are you feeling in your solar plexus, most people can go right there if you name the part of the body. And then when you ask, what does it feel like, people can usually say, well, there's something contracted or heavy or burdensome, or I feel it in my shoulders or in my clenched jaw. It doesn't sound spiritual or anything, but if you can become willing to be there and completely with whatever it is you're feeling in your body, with an unconditional warmth towards that feeling, that seems to be the way. Not so much that you get rid of the feeling, but if you can feel warmly towards that part of your body, then it all becomes very workable again. Ezra Klein. One word you use sometimes that really helps me is abiding, that you're teaching us to abide with the feelings. But for me, discomfort, uncertainty, insecurity, it took me time to see this, says Ezra Klein. But these are very physical sensations. There are a contraction in your solar plexus or in your clenched jaw or in your raised shoulders. It took me a long time to see how reflexively I ran from those feelings and instead tried to make the feeling go away. So number one is that you're teaching us, Ezra Klein summarizes, is that you're going to feel uncomfortable. That's what you're telling me, isn't it? I'm going to have discomfort, and that is not something you can remove from life. But then there's a next move that you say that I've read in your book. Sometimes you say, smile at the discomfort. Befriend it. I wouldn't say I've quite figured that one out, says Ezra Klein. What does it mean to befriend a feeling? Pema Chodron. Well, you go into your body, and you find in your body where that psychological pain is, where you're holding the grievance or the sense that you need revenge or the regret that you didn't say the right thing. You find where you're feeling that. And then you don't have to name it, but you just have to ask, what does this feel like to me right now? Not conceptually, you don't have to say a feeling or anything like that, but you just ask. And then you find that feeling in your body, and when you find that contraction or a tightness or a knot, and sometimes I can just ask the person, where is it? And some people will say, well, it's all over my body is where I found the pain. But often they'll say it's in my throat or in my stomach, wherever, it doesn't really matter. But once you're there, the attitude you must take is that it's not something that needs to be eradicated. Instead, the attitude that you must take is that you are going to send, the word I like, is tenderness. You send warmth towards it. People do this differently and find their own way towards it. If you want to conceptualize it, Pema Chodron here, you would say that you must send that part of your body unconditional love. You send it unconditional warmth and unconditional tenderness. It's like you're not going to give up on yourself. Ezra Klein, what if you don't feel unconditional love towards that part of you? Pema Chodron, if you don't feel unconditional love towards it, not a problem. Then you send the warmth and love towards the part of you that does not feel unconditional love. What does that feel like to you? Ezra Klein, what does it feel like to not have unconditional love towards myself? Pema Chodron, yes, tell me what it feels like. Ezra Klein, I think the idea of how it would feel to have unconditional love for a feeling like that is so alien to me that I can't even describe it to you. The water that I swim in is wanting certain feelings to go away, and that's my most instinctual interaction with myself. And so, if nothing else, in this series, you and I are going to explore what it does for us when we make contact with a source of unconditional love. And when we learn to feel that towards the part in our body that we would rather not feel, where it hurts, or where we are anxious, or where we have regrets, and what we are going to find is that there is someone who has unconditional love for that part of you. You have a resource that makes this possible. Let's talk about what our bodies do. Part of what our bodies do is to carry the trauma. Not just what has happened to you, but strangely what has happened to like your entire lineage. There's a science called epigenetics, which studies how our genes are in some ways expressed differently after a traumatic event. Not just in your life, but also in the lives of your children. You pass on genetic code that has to do with the traumas that you have experienced. That's a wild thing to think about. One of the more famous studies here has to do with how they torture these poor little mice. I'm going to tell you about it, and it's sort of sad, but it is quite insightful. They were trying to explore how generations pass the epigenetic information from one to the other. So they devised this study where they would expose this group of mice to the smell of a cherry blossom, and then if it got too close to the cherry blossom, it would get zapped by the floor. And so it took this first generation of mice 10 or 12 times to learn, oh, if I smell the cherry blossom, I'm probably going to get zapped. I should get out of there. And then they bred all those mice together. And then the next generation of mice, they ran the same experiment, but instead of 12 times, it took them 5 times. And then the third generation of mice, instead of 5 times, it took them 2 times to learn. That something about the olfactory sense, the genetic sense of what my brain does with this smell was passed on from generation to generation through the pain of it being shocking. Now, we can't experiment like that on humans, but there are other studies that the children of Holocaust survivors tended to develop eating disorders is a great example of you carry this stuff in your body, in your physical body, not in your mind. Your mind is unaware of its happenings, but in your very body, you carry the whole story of what has happened to your people. And here's what we're trying to suggest. Pete Scazzaro, the author of Emotionally Healthy Spirituality, says it this way: Jesus might live in your heart, but Grandpa lives in your bones. You carry the family lineage in your physical body. And so it has to be like this. If the trauma lives in our body, then the healing is in our bodies too. And we're going to invite Jesus to live within us. That is the great Christian message, that somehow Jesus comes to live within our physical bodies in a way that I think will heal some of these experiences. So let's explore. Why are we not able to access our body's message? Why did I come to be so suspicious of our own bodies? There's a clear philosophical narrative. It started with a guy, René Descartes, who said, the definition of a human is that I think, therefore I am. He said it is all up here, and you and I inherited this. This was the defining thing of the Enlightenment, that humans are rational creatures, that the thing that differentiates you from all the rest of creation is you have this amazing brain so you can think about stuff. That's what René Descartes said. Christians took the brain first way, the mind first way of reading Scripture, and they said, flesh must be bad, okay? But a closer reading of Scripture says it's much more complicated. We're going to walk through it. Ready? Paul, in the parts of the New Testament that Paul wrote, he uses the word sarx, which means flesh, to indicate the neutral part of you that tends to break bad. It's the flexible part of you, the part that can be susceptible to peer pressure, the part of you that is malleable. That's your flesh. And he's observed, right? Sometimes that breaks bad. He also used the word soma, which is body, and a lot of times those got translated the same words. It gets confusing because John, in the Gospel of John, he only uses the word sarx to capture all of that. And so it got real muddy. It was hard to discern. And when we said your brain is good, it was easy to then conclude, based on these passages, that your body is bad. Now, one of the first opponents of Christianity, called Gnosticism in the first century, what they said is the body is bad. And so many Christians said, yeah, it's right here. They're saying it, like the sarx, the flesh is bad. And so the book of John is specifically designed to combat this idea that flesh is somehow bad. But let's continue with this narrative. Descartes said, you are mostly a thinking thing. Christians read that into the Bible to say that must mean our bodies are bad. And then capitalist police states realized that policing body is a great way to enforce class and race stratification. So making you only a brain meant that it was okay for some bodies to be coded as worth more than others. This is the story of the last 500 years of our world. And it all has to do with the slowly but subtly and powerful devaluing of the human body that you and I carry with us. And The Body Keeps the Score. This is a great book. If you just want to skip these sermons and listen to this on audio tape, that would be an acceptable alternative to sitting through this. They said this: as a culture, we are trained to cut ourselves off from our feelings. That philosophical narrative arrived in you and I in a way that makes us motivated to cut off our feelings. But a close reading of the Bible shows that the human body is a gift. And this is what the book of John was after when it wrote this. The Word became flesh and made its dwelling among us. Your body is for something. It is to be a container of the presence of the living God. African-American theologian Brian Bantam said this: the incarnation is a testament to the truth that our bodies matter. Your body was designed to be filled with the Spirit of God. Richard Rohr put it this way. Oh, too many buttons. In Jesus' birth, God was saying that it was good to be a human being. It was good to be a human being with a body. This is what was so important theologically about God becoming human. He didn't just bark orders from heaven. He was demonstrating a deep union between the God self and human flesh. The human body is good. Now, this invites us to think about a theology of disability. Bodies are capable of different things, right? My neighbor in seminary, Bethany McKinney Fox, was writing her dissertation on a theology of the human body and was writing it on a theology of disability. And she was arguing that we have to be very careful in the way that we recover our sense of the human body, that we don't make it applicable to some and not others. And so 2 authors that will make their resources available through our mailing list and on our website, Nancy Iceland and Bethany McKinney Fox. They reminded us that Jesus' resurrected body was somehow both healed and scarred. He still has his scars, that every human body is broken in some ways. And what we must learn from this theology of the human body is that we are all in fact equal, that inclusion does in fact matter. If every body is made to be a vessel filled with the Spirit of the living God, then it doesn't matter what your body is capable of. It doesn't matter what it looks like. And they argue that anything that makes you feel bad about your body is a system that comes from the world that you can feel free to jettison. It's an amazing argument. Anything that makes you feel bad about your body is a system from the world that you can feel free to jettison. That's what God being incarnate says, according to the theologians of body and disability. So what then is a human body for? Scholars tell us that in the creation stories in Genesis, we are to imagine that the world being created is created as a temple for God's presence. And like any ancient temple, right in the middle, there is to be a statue that is associated with the presence of this God. And because Yahweh is the living God, he deserved a living image. You and I, made in the image of God, we are designed to be the little statue worshipped in the cosmic temple. You and I are designed to be vessels filled to the brim with the presence of the living God. There's a way of thinking about the Christian message that says Jesus died on the cross for my personal sins so that one day I could go to heaven. That's so small, that's the smallest way to conceive of the story. The true gospel is that Jesus came to forge a permanent connection between humanity and God, that God is with us. That we find the purpose of our bodies when we ask God to come. How carnal, how incarnate, how bodily is it to say, God, will you live in my heart? Will you live in my body? My body has a purpose. It is to be filled with the presence of the living God. So what are we doing in this series? We're trying to find the solution of feeling disconnected from our bodies, and the Body Keeps the Score has like a whole bunch of these, but I just want to read a partial list of stuff that it says will restore your sense of your own body. After 19 chapters of addressing the problem, it gets to the solution chapter. Here's part of the solution chapter. Collective movement and gathering and music create a larger context for our lives, a meaning beyond our individual fate. Religious rituals universally involve rhythmic movements. From davening at the Wailing Wall in Jerusalem to the sung liturgies and gestures of the Catholic Mass to moving meditation in Buddhist ceremonies and the rhythmic prayer rituals performed 5 times a day for devout Muslims, music was the backbone of the civil rights movements in the United States. Anyone alive at the time will not forget the lines of marchers, armed link singing "We Shall Overcome" as they walked steadily towards the police who were massed to stop them. Music somehow binds people together who might individually be terrified, but who collectively become powerful advocates for themselves and others. I observed the force of the communal rhythms of spirituality in action when I watched Archbishop Desmond Tutu conduct public hearings for the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa in 1996, where I attended. These events were framed by collective singing and dancing and prayer. Witnesses recounted the unspeakable atrocities that had been inflicted upon them and their families, and when they became overwhelmed, Bishop Tutu would interrupt their testimony and lead the entire audience in prayer, song, and dance until the witness could contain their sobbing and halt their physical collapse. That there is something healed within our very bodies when we gather in this way, when we recognize that God is present among us, when we enjoy the rhythms of singing and of dancing in Jesus' name, something happens to our very bodies. The science says that as we sing together, our brain waves link up in ways that soothe our nervous system. We once had one of our builders author a prayer where they stood up here and said, "Jesus, will you help me to trust you in my nervous system?" Not just my brain, not just talking to myself, but my very bodily experience of my faith. And the way that we learn to do that is by engaging our bodies more deeply in the process of praying to Jesus. Pema Chodron again said the way that we approach the parts of our lives and our bodies that we would rather deny is by finding a source of unconditional love. And I hope that if nothing else, this series is an invitation for you in the discomfort and the confusion of saying, what is my body telling me, of saying somehow that Jesus is with me, that he loves that part of me too. She also suggests that no one should just go from denying the physical reality of your embodied experience to like listening to all of it. You would go insane. Your body has too many things to tell you. So you need to baby step it. So we designed this series around that. The 5 senses are just baby steps towards listening to our bodies a little bit more closely, of praying in this embodied way, just one step at a time. And so today we're going to work on experiencing taste. Next week, when we're dwelling in the park, we'll do some other reflections on what does it mean to eat bread and drink wine and enjoy bread and honey and butter. And if you think about each one of those things, they are gross. One of them is the vomit of an insect. And yet, that's what honey is, right? Yeah, but it's delicious. And bread and wine are made from bacteria. And there's this strange way that is partly what makes them so magical. You and I have a way of screening out the parts of life that make us uncomfortable. But if we engage their full reality, gosh, there is a true beauty in it. And so just for a moment, I want to leave you with these ideas of how God uses the idea of our taste to speak more deeply to us. And then we are going to say yes to an invitation to Jesus' table, to taste the newness of his covenant. So just for a moment, some reflections on the sense of our taste and what God says to us through it. Psalm 19. The words of the Lord are firm and all of them are righteous. They are more precious than gold, than very much pure gold. God's words are sweeter than honey. That the part of you that feels anxious or tense or terrified, God has a sweet word to speak to you there. In Proverbs, God is embodied as Lady Wisdom talking to her foolish son. God, Lady Wisdom, says, "Eat honey, my foolish son, for it is good. Honey from the comb is sweet to your taste, and know also that wisdom is like honey for you. If you find it, there is a future hope for you, and your hope will not be cut off." In the sweetness of God's wisdom. And finally, God said, "Taste and see that God is good. Blessed is the one who takes refuge in him." And so as we think about God speaking to us through the five senses of our bodily experience, it becomes quite profound to recognize that the last most important thing that Jesus did before his death was to invite his friends to a meal. And he said these strange things that it was hard for them to understand, or maybe their body was telling them and they weren't listening because, boy, did they seem confused and in denial of what was happening. And so one last time, calmly, patiently, generously, Jesus explained that soon he would die and his blood would be for a new covenant, a new relationship. And then in a powerful act of connecting with their human bodies, in a powerful moment of profound symbolism, he said, "Take this bread and take this wine. It is the taste of the new covenant." And so in a moment, the band will play. And as they do, as you would feel comfortable, if you do, or if not, that's okay too. Come and enjoy the taste of this new covenant. That you would be invited to taste and see that Jesus is so good to us. Let me pray for you. Jesus, we invite you in to the story, to the experience that we have of our own bodies. God, that we have been conditioned to ignore them, or we have been incentivized to silence them. So Jesus, would you be with us as we learn to listen to them? And God, as we find that you love us in this unconditional way, would you help us to make the connection? That in our anxiety or our frustration or in our rage and our heartbreak that we feel in our bodies, that you have a sweetness, a tenderness towards that part of us. We lift our lives up to you. Amen.